All right, here at Wilmington with head coach Brandon Phillian. Brandon, how are things going?
Well, Andy, first of all, thanks for coming down. Certainly great to see you and talk to you here during camp week. I think we're having a really good camp thus far. It's a team that has a lot of opportunity. We graduated a lot of seniors last year, so a lot of open spots up for grabs. I think the team is embracing that. Everybody's getting a fair opportunity to compete and show what they can do. And I know myself and the coaches, we're embracing that, looking forward, to continuing to evaluate the guys as they move through camp. And we can start to see some things shaking out at this point. I would say having a team, a little bit of a more inexperienced team to start with. I think one thing that's very encouraging is seeing the growth of our team each and every day. And I'm happy to report that on day 4 of camp, I feel like each and every day we've continued to improve and steadily get better.
Mm-hmm. Does that make camp a little different, having so many spots to fill, as opposed to maybe a year, like last year when you kind of, I don't want to say, you knew what you had, maybe a little bit more?
I think it definitely gives camp a different feel. I think, coming into last season, we returned starters. I believe it was, 9 on the offensive side and 8 on the defensive side. So I think camp a year ago, it was a very workmanlike, business-like mindset with a lot of those guys returning in starting roles, where now it's kind of the opposite. We're looking for as many returning starters as we had a year ago. Those are as many open spots as we have this coming season. So I think it's really added an element of buzz and an element of excitement because so many guys have opportunity, and I think the guys are really embracing that and making the most of the opportunities in front of them.
Last year was obviously a challenging year for everybody. Have you guys been able to have a more typical offseason as you've headed into camp here, and how has that benefited you?
Well, we've certainly, Andy, been able to have a much more typical offseason, and it's been wonderful. I think especially this year when you have an inexperienced team, I think having a more typical offseason was a huge benefit, whereas a year ago, even though things were kind of truncated, condensed, shortened, having such a veteran team, I think we were able to weather that storm easier. Having an inexperienced team, you really want to utilize all the precious time you can get. So I think for our team this year, being a bit more inexperienced, to have a typical off season, I think has paid huge dividend for us.
Mm-hmm. And I have to imagine replacing so many guys, there's probably great competition too at every spot.
Absolutely. You look at the guys that are competing. They're guys last year that they were in and out of the starting lineup situationally, offensively depending on the formations we were using, or defensively depending on the personnel we needed in there. A lot of these guys saw a lot of varsity playing time last year, even if they weren't in the starting roles, and a lot of them played big roles for us on the special teams and did a great job on the scout team. So these are guys that are hungry, they're excited, they're certainly making the most of their opportunity. And I think when you look at this year's team, the returning guys, the seniors, the juniors, they've saw what it's looked like from the older players the past few years, so they have seen the way modeled in order to what it takes to achieve success, and now it's their turn. They want to leave their mark, they want to leave their imprint on this football team and this football program.
Mm-hmm. Are you excited to maybe have a little bit more, obviously not maybe, it's more of a traditional, typical schedule here in 2021?
We're very excited, Andy, to have a traditional, typical schedule. That was some of the feedback from last year's team was, they really enjoyed that typical schedule of a new team and a new challenge each week, as opposed to playing the same team multiple times. And that's something that the feedback from this year's team, they're very excited to get back to a more normal, more traditional schedule where you're playing each of your opponents once in the regular season.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you guys have had a ton of success. And a lot, success is measured a lot by wins and losses, but how do you define success within your program?
That's a great question, and he's defining success within our program. To me, I think that when you look at our vision, we talk a lot about building lasting relationships. I think the success of the program isn't measured in the short term, but rather in the long term. I think that the success of the program is something that you look back on when guys leave the program and you maintain those relationships, and you see, hey, what are they doing 10 years later? What kind of husbands are they? What kind of fathers are they? What kind of jobs do they have? What kind of contributions are they giving back to society? Are they embracing servant leadership? Things that we try to promote within our program. In my opinion, that's how we measure the success of our program, is years later when you look back and you see what values from the Wilmington football program stayed with our young men years down the road, what values that they learned in Wilmington football do they continue to live by at that time. I think that's really the ultimate indicator of the success of a program.
Mm-hmm. And just lastly, how anxious, how excited are you guys to get this thing rolling?
We're very eager, very excited. I think that, the boys have had a great summer, a great week of heat acclimatization. They're having a great camp week thus far. And certainly all of that builds up to the scrimmage on Saturday. And then, of course, it really builds up to game number 1. So I think there's a lot of excitement. A lot of these guys are really raring to go. So, I know it'll be great to come out here having our first game at home, come out to what should be a normal sized crowd in our stadium and having fans back and just that atmosphere that you can't replace. So, yeah, we're very excited, very eager to get going with game number 1.
All right, Coach, thanks so much for your time.
All right, Andy, thanks to you and D9and10sports.com for being here. Certainly appreciate the chance to talk to you and appreciate the coverage.
Absolutely.